Hi, this is Nicole Birkholzer of Mindful Connections, and this is the Red Sofa series. My mission is to mindfully connect horses and humans, and with this show, I'll bring you expert perspectives on everything equine and mindful ponderings from our own backyard. May you be informed, inspired, and mindfully connected. Hi, this is Nicole Birkholzer with Mindful Connections on the Red Sofa. Today we are talking to Geri White in our workshop series, It's All About the Horse, that is a benefit for Blue Star Equiculture in Palmer, Massachusetts. This workshop series is meant to educate the horse community and to give practitioners, equine wellness practitioners, a chance to promote their skills, promote their knowledge, and to help give them a platform to really share things that maybe most of us in the horse community are not even aware of, how we can help our horses and how we can support our own understanding of what's available. So today we're going to talk to Geri. Geri is a good friend of mine by now. I met her several years ago as a barefoot trimmer, and she is not just a barefoot trimmer, which she will tell you in a few minutes, but she is an educator in the field of barefoot hoof care. And in the meantime, over the years, I then realized that Geri really has an amazing understanding of how to take care of a horse holistically, including through the environment the horse lives in. And the topic of today is Paddock Paradise, and Geri will spend most of her time today talking about Paddock Paradise and how it can positively affect our herd management, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of more information on all the other skills and knowledges she has to share with us today. So again, welcome. Thanks for coming and spending your time with us.
Thanks for inviting me. I've been excited about coming here and sharing with everybody. I guess everybody has to start their journey with footsteps. And mine is no different than yours. I might be a little on a different trail or maybe further down the trail, but you're all on the trail and we're all on this together. And that's why you're here. And I'll just share some of my experiences that I've had along the way. You know, most of us, we do the normal thing that we've been taught about horses, and it's usually on the conventional route until something happens. And our horses start telling us there's something wrong. You have a lameness, you come to a crisis of conscience, and you have to say there's a different way to do this. And this is how I, found my way into being a barefoot trimmer. I've been with horses for 40 years. I started out as a trail guide. I've been around hundreds and hundreds of horses, ridden them, and they've just been a part of my life for most of my life. So I wound up with a horse that had what we would call a club foot, a high-low foot. When he grazes in this grazing stance. So he gets one foot that gets a long toe and a low heel, the other one gets a high heel and a short toe. Well, what that does to the whole horse's body is it makes the shoulders asymmetrical, their back end is asymmetrical. So in a couple of weeks after being shod, he would be trippy, lame, problems, and there was never any advice offered by the farrier about what to do, except maybe do him more often, and putting shoes on a horse more often meant you destroy the hoof walls, and we were going nowhere fast. I came upon a winter that didn't start till about mid-January. I always pulled the shoes off my horses in November, but still rode them. And I rode him from November to January, and I clearly was riding a different horse. He had some natural wear on his feet. The only thing I did different was that. The next thing that happened is a magazine shows up in my mailbox, Horse and Rider, with a big banner across the top, is barefoot for your horse. And I'm like, wow, I'm listening.
The signs are showing up.
So I read the magazine. My husband and my son were away visiting his parents, and I read the magazine. I ordered the books. I read all of them within days. My husband came home and I said, I want to do this.
I'm a changed woman.
I want to do this. So he says, all right. He says, we'll put you through school. So I enrolled in the Equine Sciences Academy. Well, before I did that, actually, I called a trimmer. She lived pretty far from me, but she said, all right, I'll come up. She says, if you want to learn how to trim, I can't come up there regular. I'll help you out. So she spent an entire day with me. We went over anatomy. She brought cadavers, and we spent the whole day together. And we went out, we did my horses. She came up 2 more times, and within those times, I also started to travel with her and watch her work. And by the 3rd time that we did my horses, she said, you have a knack for this, and there's not enough of us around here. She says, you need to go to school. There's a new school that just started. So I applied, I got accepted, applied for a scholarship, I got that. So, and then I worked my way through schooling through the Equine Sciences Academy. What I love about the Academy is that the first thing we learn is critical thinking skills. Because when you change from one paradigm to another, if you can't think your way through it, you're going to be lost. You're going to be just beat over the head by the old ways and maybe drawn back to it. But a horse, you know, is a horse, and you can't just look at their feet and fix what's there. Everything about their body determines what you get on the ground. The hoof grows from the horse. The posture of the horse determines which way they grow. The diet gives you the quality of the foot. So the Academy taught us whole horse care, which included dentistry, saddle fitting, rider balance, diet, environment, what wild horses do, because just because our horses are not free and behind fences doesn't mean they don't think like a horse did eons ago. When they come out of the womb and they hit the ground, for all they know, they're supposed to run 15 miles with the herd almost immediately. But, you know, they're in fences, and we can't do that. So this is why we have to trim horses' feet, because they don't get the movement to wear them at the rate that they grow. This is why we have to do dentistry, because they don't wear their teeth as they use them, because we give them everything chopped up and cut up. The hay's cut up, the grain is all, you know, so we have to provide these services for horses. And if we don't do it and it's not done correctly, it sets off the domino effect, you know, and then you don't see it until your horse is lame or your horse has a problem with its back, with its mouth. We're all connected. Every part is connected. So what I was trained for is to know what is wrong with the horse, the cause, and fix that. Because if a horse has a dental malocclusion, that means he can't turn his head to the left. That's going to show up in his feet. Maybe it's going to be a flare. Maybe it's going to be a crack. I can take that flare down, and I can, you know, tell the owner what to do with the crack, but it's going to keep coming back over and over, and I'll be revisiting the same thing every time I show up. So when you identify the cause, so say the cause is a hook, maybe on the number 11 molar, I call Wendy. She's my equine dentist that I work with, and she takes care of that, and guess what? The horse can move better now, more natural, more the way it should. And we can grow that flare out. We can grow that crack out. I've done it many times with her. And I work with chiropractor, acupuncture, homeopathy, because these are my team. I can't know everything, and we all independently have a passion for each modality that we do. So I rely on my team when I have a problem that we can't fix. So my approach is really a whole horse approach, and it's developed, and it continuously develops. We all have to learn how to speak horse, and unfortunately we have to learn it from horses. And we will always speak broken horse, so we will always be a perpetual student of the horse. But as long as you have that mindset, you will never ever stop learning. And really, it's good to learn from people, but it's best to learn from horses.
And I think that's actually such a good point, because I think most of us feel like we should know it all, and we're always around people that know it all. I mean, there's like that good old saying, like 5 horse people, 7 opinions.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
everybody has the answer, knows everything. And this goes back to, it's like our horse knows best, and we should know second, because we are the closest to our horse. If we are really mindful and pay attention to our horse and really observe and do, in a way, that's like what I always try to teach people, is that when we don't know, that doesn't mean we're bad. That doesn't mean that we don't, we're not smart, or we don't are good caretakers. I think the best caretaker is the one that is willing to investigate. I think if we keep going like, okay, so that wasn't it, but let me try something else and reevaluate and come up with another solution, or let me get more information, or let me call someone that might know or has had a case that sounded similar. That's how we become really great investigators, and then can hypothesize and draw conclusions that give us an opportunity to try something new. And if we as horse owners would really allow ourselves to be the perpetual student, I think we would be so much better off than trying to constantly try to be the best we can and catch up and eventually be perfect, because that won't happen.
And I think that's part of the problem that some of us have with vets, because, you know, they spent a lot of money to get those 3 letters after their name. And, you know, they feel like they know it all. And really, we always depended on them. I mean, when I was growing up a long time ago, you know, the vet was the one that said, you know, and that was the way you just did it. And traditions, you know, are just traditions. They're here, and they're hard to get rid of, and they're hard to change. But when you find vets that are open-minded, those are the ones that, you know, are coming out of the box that you can really talk to. But some of them, you know, you can't, it's difficult to work with them. But I think an educated owner who asks the right questions may be the main thing that makes a veterinarian actually start thinking different. So I've worked with Dr. Bowker from the University of Michigan, and he's a PhD is in neurology, and he's known for his work with the horse's foot. And he has told us, he says, I cannot go to my colleagues to tell them what I know, because they don't pay attention, they don't want to know, they think I'm crazy. He says, so I will go to the owners of the horses that want to hear this. And it's those people in the grassroots that have to come around and talk to their veterinarians, and that's where change happens. So educating horse owners is the biggest part of this whole puzzle.
So that we start challenging.
Yeah, and you know, asking informed questions. I mean, you can ask a question and they might give you an answer, but if you give them a question that they really have to think about, you know, like the vaccination issue, there are things that you can know. There's a lot of information out there that you can know what to ask and how to ask those questions. And actually even tell your vet, I'd rather do this. I mean, just because the vet's there doesn't mean your horse has to get those shots. There are implications. Every time we do something to a horse, it's going to show somewhere, good or bad. And because, for lack of a better term, the yin and yang, or homeostasis, the balance of everything where it should be. When it's where it should be, we have health, and we're either moving toward health or we're moving away from health. So when the immune system begins to get challenged, we start to become symptomatic on the outside. Skin problems, flies like them some more, ripples in the hoof wall, loss of top line on the back, you know, all of these things. So when we start to recognize these things as being related to all the others, you know, whole horse, we have to treat the whole being. And find the cause, treat the cause, and bring that balance back to where it should be. This is also with parasites, too. I've spent a lot of time working with that, too. And we'll go over that a little bit later, too, with the PowerPoints I have.
Yeah. Right. So why don't we do a little transition into Paddock Paradise?
Okay.
How did you become aware of it, and how did you start implementing it in your own life? And then we're going to actually eventually take a walk around here at Blue Star to show people what a Paddock Paradise looks like and the benefits of it.
All right, so my introduction to Paddock Paradise was I had 2 horses at the time, and I had all these very green, lush pastures. And my club-footed horse, Sage, he got laminitic and foundered.
Do you want just in 2 sentences say what that is?
Laminitis? Well, it's hard to say what laminitis is in 2 sentences. I'll try. Okay. So laminitis really is inflammation in the lamina, which connects the hoof wall to the coffin bone. It's kind of like Velcro. It goes together like that. It actually almost looks like that. So when there's inflammation there, it comes apart. So now the hoof wall is no longer connected to the coffin bone, and the coffin bone drops, the sole drops, and now the coffin bone is this far from the ground, and it hurts. That's basically the best way I can explain it. There's a lot more to that, but
on your website.
yeah. There's a lot more to it.
To give people.
Anyway, so this happened to him. And so I started with a grazing muzzle, and he hated it. He put it on, he stuck his nose in it, he was okay about it, but I could tell in his eyes, he says, I really hate this. So I thought, well, what else can I do? And in my course curriculum through the ESA, we had to study Paddock Paradise. It was just pretty new then. Jamie Jackson's book, Paddock Paradise, was really where I started. And so I read it, and I sat down with my husband, we talked about it, and we just got some step-in posts and some electric tape fence, and we started with a little section just to see what they would do. And
so what is the Paddock Paradise, like what's the idea of it? So
the idea, system, yeah, I guess? The idea is most horses, if they stand in a field, they simply stand in a field, unless you have some young whippersnapper that likes to push them around. But they really, if you look in your travels around the roads, most horses that are standing out in a field are basically standing in the field, or they only have to move a few steps to eat grass here and there. What Paddock Paradise does is creates anywhere from 8 to 16 to 20 foot wide path completely around that box. So you take them out of it and you put them in the perimeter of it. So, and if you put their grain, their food, I don't feed grain to my horses. I just say grain because it's a bag feed. But if you put everything out all spread around the track, now the horse has to move around the track. They have the motivation to move because if they want to eat, they got to take some steps to do it. If they want to drink, they got to take some steps to do it. If they want to find their shelter, their water, everything, they have to move to do it. For a horse, that is the big kahuna. Movement is medicine. Because they are a herd animal, a prey species, and they run and ask questions later. They're meant to move, 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 move. When I was out with the wild horses, that's all they did. They never stopped. It was hard to get a still picture of them until they put their head down to get a few nibbles, and off they went again. So they're known to move anywhere between 15 and 20 miles a day. And this all is the natural wear with their feet, which they don't get when we, confine them. Or put them in a stall, which is worse. I mean, a lot of horses that I trim that are turned out 24/7 have really, really nice feet for the most part, especially if it's textured, if there's stone out there, if there's gravel that they can walk on. If they have a soft environment and the owner doesn't ride them and they're just basically there retired, I'll actually trim that foot a little differently because their environment, their use have to have everything to do with how I trim their feet. I've learned this from studying a bunch of horses out of rescue that live on 110 acres, and some of them we don't trim very much. But I thought that was really good because I could observe what kind of foot does this horse in this environment need to survive. So I would just take off the little imbalances I would see, and they would actually maintain their foot a lot longer because I wasn't offending what they needed. So my ideals of trimming that foot can't be that Western Basin model. It has to be the model that works for that environment. So there can't be a set way to trim a horse's foot. You have to get the input from the horse, from the owner, from the environment, from the use, and then you develop your trim based on what the horse is doing in its life and try to make the best trim that will last the longest and keep the horse the most soundest for the longest period of time.
And preferably you set up the environment up so that there are options for the horse to choose. Because I know we had this conversation at one point that there are wild horses that are out in the west that have very different feet than, for example, the one that are more on the sandy...
on the barrier islands?
Yeah, so
they do.
Their feet are very different. So I think by giving a Paddock Paradise setup where there are choices to be made for the horse picks its own natural, best, most comfortable way, and then the trimming can happen in accordance to what that particular horse needs.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't very many horses I have found that don't need any trimming that live on Paddock Paradise. I mean, what we have really is horses that live in dysfunctional families because they are not related to each other. That's a whole...
Yeah, they don't even get to choose to be in a herd.
Yes, we put them together and they work it out. They adapt. But in the wild, they're families, And it's another motivator for moving around, you know, the breeding aspect of it and all that other that we don't have even in Paddock Paradise. So yes, there are some horses that are in Paddock Paradise situations that I do trim that I only use my rasp on maybe every 6 weeks. So that's about the best case scenario. Then there's some owners that learn how to do their own horses, which is the best for the horse, because you can do it as often as needed and don't have to wait 5 weeks for me to show up. And so the horse is not really getting a big change when I'm nippering off, you know, this much of a foot. So that's another thing I like to do, is teach owners how to do their own horse's feet, because it's the best thing for the horse. I'm in this for the horse. Whatever works for the horse has to be what I do. So the input that I get from the horse, from the owner, in between trims, really helps me give that horse the trim it really needs. And every foot has a need. Every single foot is different. Every single trim is different. So every single time I show up, it has to be different, because the environment dictates that too. It changes. If we have mud, if we have dry, if we have ice. For example, ice. When there's a lot of ice and snow on the ground, horses will generate more bars. You know, when a regular farrier shows up, well, they just trim all that down. Well, I used to trim it down like I normally would until 3 days later I picked up my horse's foot and noticed they were back in 3 days. And I didn't realize why they popped back until I was trying to walk down to the water hole to chop the ice, and he sailed right past me while I was slipping and sliding all over. And those bars, along with his heels, created nice little natural heel caulks that actually gripped the ground. They were going forward, and he was able to navigate the ice.
Mom, I'll show you why I need to.
Yes, but you see, you know, I'm looking and listening and learning all the time. So, and every day I learn something. Every time I pick up a foot, it's a chapter in this learning process, and you have to listen to it. And the same thing with the whole rest of the animal.
Great. So I think what might make sense is for people to understand what a Paddock Paradise looks like. Yep. Before we go into the more specific setups and options and reasons why and how it can be beneficial. Mm-hmm. And we have here at Blue Star actually a really terrific start of a Paddock Paradise. There are 30, no, what did we say, like 25, 26 horses on this Paddock Paradise out here. And we will give you a little bit more detail about the setup, how it's used, and what can actually be improved as the next steps to make it an even more ideal setting for these horses here.
Take a question?
Absolutely.
You have 10 or 20 foot wide paths that you channel the horses down?
Yeah, well, actually, I like to change them because the narrower they are, the quicker they go through them. And you don't want them to just be in a small track all the time, because you want them to actually slow down in areas. I have places where there's trees, so we open it up. And the area where my water hole is all open, so they go down to the water hole. And then I have areas where I have slow feeder bags hanging on the fences, and I give them a little more room for that. I have 5 horses. So what I did was try to make it as interesting as possible so that they didn't stay in one place all the time. And so I have a diverse 5 horses that are vary in age. So, and I have one that's a real motivator. So he's the guy who really keeps everybody moving, but that's his job. He's my physical therapist. He does a good job at it. And I do let them graze for just 2 hours, because, you know, when you make the track, you're fencing off the inside part of your property. And so the grass is able to grow. The reason I do the 2 hours mainly started off with Sage, the one who foundered, because he had a crusty neck and he had all these problems with grass. So 2 hours was fine. But I did it in the early morning. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Katie Watts. She has a website called safergrass.org, and she can tell you everything and anything you want to know about any kind of grass or plants that grow in your field, and the benefits and the downfalls of a horse's grazing. But anyways, she has found that in the early morning hours before the sun comes up are the best time to graze a horse, because the sugar and the fructan levels in the grass are at their lowest. So I turn my horses out probably around between 6 and 7 this time of year, and they're in by 9 o'clock. So they get, you know, grazing time, and then they come back and they're on the track. And the rest of the time they're out there walking around the track. They find their hay in those hay bags and their water, and they have a nice grove out front that's got trees, and they lay down out there in the leaves or whatever's on the ground. So it's a diverse environment rather than standing in a box, which really, would any of us, how many people work, you hear that you know, have friends that work in offices and they're in cubicles and they're basically like a horse in a stall. And what do they say? They can't wait to get out of it. You know, so they're no different than we are. We really need to move around more too as humans.
And I want to say one more thing about the pasture. What's really, I think, important for us to know, especially in the New England area here, is most of the horse farms we have here are old dairy farms. And so we feed our horse, and that's actually one of the things that Katie is saying, right?
Katie Watts? Yeah.
Always says, you know, we feed our horses like cows.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely wrong, because, you know, cows need that rich type of grass, you know, for milk production and all that stuff, which our horses don't need that. I mean, and you'll see that later on in Geri's presentation.
Yeah.
What the horses in the wild really eat is nothing compared to what we are feeding out here, putting them onto a pasture. So there is a real importance to managing the diet, since the horse can't manage on its own. If it's a green pasture, it's a green pasture, and it can't pick anything else. But if we can manage it through something like a Paddock Paradise, you know, there are real benefits for the intestinal tract and everything else that comes with that. So
yeah, that's another thing I'll address about the intestinal tract, and the fact that laminitis and colic are the #1 and 2 killers of horses, and a huge problem recently has been ulcers. And that's all from our feeding and keeping practices.
Yeah. So yes, thanks for the question. Right. So I think we'll just take a walk outside.
Yeah, cool.
All right.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Because we ran into this a little bit in the morning with Carl, where he's looking at adopting Mikey, who in the past has had abscess trouble. He's a Shire, and I don't know, we typically see the Clydes and the Shires having not such great feet.
Yeah.
But we don't want to put shoes on him. It's not that bad. But what are your thoughts about abscesses?
Abscesses are usually from the diet, or I'm seeing this a lot with vaccinations. Yes. Actually, if you think about it, I just went through this with an owner just 2 days ago, because she says, why is my horse continually abscessing? And actually, I caught this back in the fall, because, you know, he lives in a dirt paddock. There's no grass. And he blew 2 abscesses right out of his back feet. And I sent her an email about it. And she said, oh, well, the doctor was just here and he said their feet look great. And I'm thinking, well, why was the doctor there? So I called her back and I said, why was the doctor there if there was, you know, nothing wrong with the horse? Oh, he came to give fall vaccinations. So I printed her out Dr. Mark DiPaolo's protocol for vaccination, and I gave it to her. And she called me back. She says, I've cried buckets and buckets and buckets of tears. I says, you just learned something very valuable, and your horse won't have to go through this anymore. But I have to say that I see abscesses in the change of season, when the diet's been changed because of grass or frost on the grass, or basically seasonal changes. There's things on this planet that we cannot see or have control over in the atmosphere. Let me just give you a quick for instance, because I had all of my horses in my clientele, which is around 300 horses, have a line in their foot, a stress line. And I saw it coming down, and I'm like, every single horse has this. Why do they have this? I don't understand this. And you won't believe what I linked it to when we had the Fukushima. That was the only thing that I could think of linking it to. We do know that radiation did come to the United States from that, but they are connected to the earth still. Their feet are still on the earth. We're not. We wear shoes. We live on boards and concrete and all this other stuff. And I can't prove this. This is just my observation. But why would every single horse I trim have this stress line in their
at the
foot
same time.
at the same time. So, you know, like I said, we can't see radiation. There's a lot of things that happen to our planet that we just don't see or know or have any control over. So, and it's not like wild horses don't get this stuff either. They do, and I have pictures to show that they do. But because they're not confined, they can get over it. So, anyways, back to abscesses.
We can control, though,
yes,
are things like it's not as
are things like
vaccines.
diet, vaccines. I mean, you can't do away with all of them. I'm not against vaccination. What I'm against is the yearly mindless vaccinations of horses, because horses are vaccinated more than any other animal on this planet.
Maybe our children.
Them too.
Yeah.
But actually, even our children get 46 doses of vaccination before they enter school.
Yeah.
Our horses get far more than that, because we start when they're babies, and they get them every single year until they die. And if you do the math, which I have done, it comes out to about 300 to 500 doses of vaccination.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Without checking any titers to see if it's
Yes.
necessary.
Yes, absolutely. And not only that, if you look at the vaccine vial, it says intended for healthy animals only. And I have seen countless times where they have been vaccinated when they have Cushing's, when they've been laminitic, when they have some other problem or a lameness issue, when the immune system is trying to help heal something and you add that insult into the picture, you have a crash. So, I mean, that's a big one for abscesses. So diet, environmental change, vaccinations, even worming can make an abscess. So it always starts on the inside. And it's always the upset of the homeostasis, the balance, or the yin and yang that does it. So really our quest should be to try to keep that balance there as often as possible. We do have to do some things. And there are other things you can do if you have to vaccinate your horse. There's homeopathic remedies to give to help for reactions. You got to get to know a really good homeopath. You know, and they can be limited. There is literally no state laws. And here's the other thing. You can keep titering an animal, and the titer will go down. And this is where they try to get you, the veterinarians and the drug companies, as they're saying the titer's going down. But if you don't have a challenge in your system, there's no need for the antibodies to be at that level.
Right.
This is why we have T cells and B cells. And everybody knows about T cells from AIDS. These cells are our memory cells, and you cannot pull and measure what they store. But it's their job, when you have this infection again, to create antibodies that will then, I mean, our bodies are designed for this, and we're messing around with a design that we don't understand.
Yeah, it's kind of, we had a horse that died. He had neurological symptoms, so the state mandates that you have to remove his head and have him tested.
I've done that. I've had to do it.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
To Boston, but you know, because we're a public organization too, we have all of these people handling the horses' thing.
Yeah.
And they don't want any chance that there might be rabies,
You know, so
We just had a human rabies death, that month.
which is awful.
yeah, it is.
That's the scary part of it all.
Yep.
Because that's undiagnosable practically until the
Yeah.
symptoms are
Yep, I know.
Once the symptoms are there,
Don't I know?
that's it, yeah.
So, yeah, I know it's a very scary road to walk on. But, you know, just, you know, what I want to do is just give you information so that you can act on it and ask the right questions. I'm not saying do this or do that, you know.
No, but I love it. I love understanding it more.
Well, and we are the power, right? I mean, that's what we were talking about.
Absolutely.
If the horse community goes on strike with some of these things, you know, then things need to be rethought.
Yeah.
It's similar with soil. You know, we have the very same companies that are selling all these chemicals to improve the soil are killing our soil.
Yeah,
everywhere.
absolutely.
And the best way for our soil to heal is to have every invasive thing removed, which is us.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. I'm totally in agreement there.
And the pH levels in the soil, all that. To
Yep.
get to them, you have to give them the things that give it the food it needs.
So you can actually take that same application that you're using for the earth and use it for each individual that lives on the earth.
Yeah.
Because it's all connected.
But isn't it interesting that it's the pharmaceuticals?
Yeah.
The big ag companies
But if you think about it, you know, Monsanto is exactly right. So, I mean, I guess I'll be preaching to the choir here. You all know, you know, but that's, you know, it all matters and it's all connected. And actually, you know, that is big with horses too. pH levels and chemicals in the soil. I mean, I've seen horses founder on that.
Heavy metals and toxic. Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, there's so many, like there's fungi that will eat all that stuff out of the soil in a couple months, in a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
If you know to put it, it's not expensive.
Yeah.
You can inoculate all your soil with it, any pasture with it, and your horses will be fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. It's amazing what we just need to know, like just the basic common sense stuff that we need to know that we're not told. And we're very disconnected.
Yeah, unfortunately, the laws and the rules are made by those who pockets have been salted by the people who put the money in there. And the pharmaceutical companies are huge there. I mean, most of the veterinary books are printed and funded by those companies. Let's take a walk.
All right, let's take a walk.